All right, chapter 3 is the prenatal development chapter. So it's another biological chapter, kind of like chapter 2. We have the biological, we have the cognitive, and we have the social emotional. So this next one and the next, I think this chapter and maybe even the next one is a lot of the biological. Chapter 6, we start to get into the cognitive, and then chapter 10 is when the social and emotional stuff starts. So anyways, if you're like, I'm tired of all this biological stuff, and in a couple more chapters, we'll switch over to the cognitive. The chapter starts off with a story about pregnancy, and we actually have a similar story. Leif was born premature, and because of preeclampsia was one of the reasons he was born premature. And so we talked a little bit about all the diagnostic tests that you can do and how you need to check in on the baby during prenatal stages. And so, yeah, something like preeclampsia can happen. And then once you learn about that, you're like, okay, well, we got to have the baby now. We can't wait until, for natural childbirth. Anyways, there is a story at the beginning of the chapter that's similar to that story if you'd like to read that. For learning goals for this chapter, we have described prenatal development, we have described the birthing process, and explain the changes that take place in the postpartum period. On prenatal development, so you have conception, first of all, obviously. This is when a single sperm cell unites with an egg from the female. This is the process called fertilization, and then over the next few months, the genetic code directs a series of changes in this fertilized egg. It's kind of crazy, so, a different egg, different sperm, you have a different person. Either one of those completely, totally changes the person. If you have siblings, think about it. Completely different people, probably for a lot of you. The typical prenatal development lasts from 266 to 280 days, so around 9 months, like you typically would think of. It's divided into 3 periods right here. The first stage, germinal, it takes place in the first 2 weeks after conception, and it includes the creation of the zygote. That's the fertilized egg. There's continued cell division, and then the implantation. So this is the attachment of the zygote to the uterine wall. By 1 week, cell differentiation has already begun. The group of cells consists of the inner mast, the blastocyst, that will become the embryo, and then the outer layer, the trophoblast, which later provides the nutrition and support for the embryo. All right, in the second stage, it is the embryonic stage, and this occurs from 2 to 8 weeks after conception. The cell differentiation intensifies, the support systems form, cells form, the organs begin to appear. The blastocyst is now an embryo and has 3 layers. The inner endoderm will develop. This will become the digestive and the respiratory systems. The middle mesoderm will become the circulatory system, the bones, the muscles, the excretory system, and the reproductive system. And then the outermost layer, the ectoderm, will become the nervous system and the brain, the sensory receptors, and then the skin parts. Also during this period, some other things are forming. The amnion, it's a bag or envelope that contains a clear fluid in which the developing embryo floats, like amniotic fluid. The umbilical cord contains 2 arteries and 1 vein. It connects the baby to the placenta, and the placenta is a disc-shaped group of tissues in which the small blood vessels from the mother and the offspring intertwine. They're going back and forth to each other. Through this system, small molecules will pass through: oxygen, water, salt. Those pass from the mother's blood to the offspring, and then carbon dioxide and digestive wastes move from the offspring to the mother. Also during this time, you have orgogenesis. So this is the process of organ formation during the first 2 months of the prenatal development. That is the end of the embryonic stage, and then we get into the fetal period. It lasts about 7 months, so the majority of the time is spent here. The growth and development continue their dramatic course. Pregnancies are often described as 3 trimesters, each 3 months long. These trimesters are not the same as the 3 prenatal periods that we just went through, the germinal, the embryonic, and the fetal. The germinal and the embryonic, those are in the first trimester, and then the fetal period begins in the first trimester and continues through the second and the third trimester. And kind of related to this, the idea of viability. This is the possibility of surviving outside the womb. This occurs at the very end of the second trimester. And then, so we have figure 3A, B, and C that go through the prenatal development, and they are, you might look through these figures. I think that they're pretty interesting. You look at them in the textbook or in the PowerPoint, and it goes through some of these things we've talked about, the zygote. Some of these things are pretty interesting, like by 12 weeks, the fingerprints are present, can smile, frown. By 16 weeks, the heartbeat is strong, the skin is thin. By 24 weeks, the eyes are open. 28 weeks, very active. Feel the baby moving around. Becomes less active there towards the end. Anyways, with these figures, if you'd like to look through these, I think you might find them kind of interesting. So that is the end for that section. We are next going to get into the development of the brain.